Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. If you don't know me, my name is Monique Carayol. I'm a co-founder of Bravery in the Boardroom. I'm also an ex-NHS director, and I'll be your host for this afternoon. Ranjit. So Ranjit, welcome, and I'm so pleased you're with me today. I just want to say a small thing before Ranjit speaks is that Ranjit has been instrumental in helping us to get to know key people in the region and also bringing the energy about wanting to deliver this. We're not commissioned by the NHS, but I really feel that we've worked in partnership with Ranjit and the EDI team to be able to bring the session today. So Ranjit, over to you.
Thank you very much, Monique. Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ranjit Saur. I'm Head of Programmes for EDI, Health and Wellbeing and Staff Engagement for the Southwest region. I've had a bit of a cold and an asthma, so I might feel sound a bit echoey, but it's because I think I'm talking in my nose with the illness. Anyway, welcome to everybody. Welcome to our virtual event. It's amazing to see so many of you here today, and I hope today that today's panel will inspire you all to continue with your journeys to reach your goals. I feel very proud and humbled to see history in the making. Today, we've got our very first Asian Prime Minister for the United Kingdom. I'm not sure how long this will last, but I do hope he does an amazing job to get the country back into economic balance. Obama, he served the United States as the first Black president. He was in power for less than 8 months when he was awarded the Nobel Prize for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between people. Amongst loads of other great things, his healthcare reforms for the ordinary man really inspired hope for the better future for America. So the dialogue recognizing diversity and inclusion is definitely moving. It's not just words anymore. All of us have moved these words into action. I attended the London's Bravery in the Boardroom event earlier this year and was fascinated with the experience shared by our colleagues. And I asked Monique to work with us to run our Southwest Bravery in the Boardroom session. We all have a duty to ensure that everyone across the Southwest region feels that the NHS is the best place to work, where staff can fulfil their needs and meet everyone and everyone's encouraged to reach their full potential. I'm now going to pass you on to my colleague, David Corbin, who will be sharing some of our diversity data and priorities for the region before we meet the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjit. Thank you, and welcome, David. Millie, could we put David's slides up for him? And I should say, yes, I saw, just before you start, David, I saw a question in the chat about will we share the recording? Yes, we will. So anyone who's registered for today will get a link to the recording once it's available. We'll also share the slides because I know David will kill me in terms of, we've had to make his slides a little bit small. So we're not expecting you to be able to see all what David's shown you, but we've absolutely got David's permission to share these slides with you after. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Monique, and good afternoon, everyone. Those that don't know me, my name is David Corbin. I am the Southwest Workforce EDI Workforce Race Equality Standard Manager, and my pronouns are he and him. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview in the thinking about the time that we've been allotted to give you a bit of a background. I'm hoping that most people that have seen the previous year's Workforce Race Equality Standard report none of this information will come as a shock to you, and obviously we've already submitted the data for this year's reporting and we should have that report with us by December. So on the slides at the moment you can see what our vision is. This is what has been worked on by our chief execs and the very top of our region about what our vision is, and also what our purpose will be. Creating a culture where people feel valued, heard and able to be their best selves at work, develop our leaders in a compassionate and inclusive way in all that they do, recruit and develop a more diverse workforce and equitable representation, and an initial focus on disability, race, ethnicity and LGBTQ. Not that all the other protected characteristics are not going to be considered as well, but that's where our initial focus is going to be. And then we have our 3 areas of focus, which will be around leadership, culture and policy, and accountability. Next slide, please. Again, I'm not expecting you to be able to read all of this, and this data is available on the Health Education England dashboard, so anyone can go and look at this and see where we're at. And I suppose the things I really want to pick out from this slide are the fact that we've got 77-23% split across the organisation. The ethnicity within the NHS in the Southwest has gone up. You can see by that graph on the right that it's going up. We've seen an increase, and that is now at 12.5%. And the whole idea around this is to make sure that that 12.5% within the Southwest have a career progression which is equal to their white counterparts. And increasing also, we can see, is the sexual orientation declarations as we have on ESR and our disability declaration. Just a point to note is that disability is at 4.6, but when we look at our staff survey, it's closer to 20 to 23% of our organisation. So we still know there's much more work to be done around disability disclosure and sharing of information through ESR. Next slide, please. Again, looking at our workforce, and the lines running across each of these slides is the average, and you can see where we are at across our own region in the Southwest, with a lot of work being done across particular work groups, not just on race, but on all of the areas that we've spoken about. And you can see where that increase is above the Southwest average in all of those areas. The medical and dental workforce for our Black minority ethnic staff and nursing and midwifery in particular are really improving as we go through the work that we're doing. The international workforce, there's a lot of work going on through the Stay and Thrive group to support and hopefully to retain our international nurses, particularly in medical, dental and nursing and midwifery areas. Next slide, please. And I suppose everyone likes a RAG rating. So I've looked at the key indicators across the Southwest. And I suppose the areas that we really need to be focused on are those where we can see the greatest disparity in those figures. So promotion or progression for people from band 1 to upper bands is a real concern. We have the best in the Southwest as 0.53 to 1, but the worst is 33.72 to 1. And the national average is 1.83 to 1. So we've got some work to do. We've identified where organisations are focusing their attention. We're helping them with their action plans, and we really need to be moving the dial on these disparities, especially the areas that are red, moving them into amber and then eventually onto green. So we've got some work to do, as you can see in the Southwest, in that key indicator 1. Another area that we need to be really focusing on is the difference across the Southwest in key indicators 5 to 8, and that information is coming directly from our staff survey. And I know the staff survey is out at the moment. I'm not sure whether the data's passed, but we do need as many people as possible to complete that staff survey so we can get a really true reflection of what people's experiences are in the NHS. So we fluctuate again in the Southwest from the 220 organisations that have been that have taken part in the Workforce Rate Equality Standard and the staff survey, that we have the best in the region in some areas in the top 10 and others as low down as 213 out of 220 organisations. And me being a really competitive soul, I don't want any of our organisations in that bottom percentage. I want to get everybody up at least into the top 100 in the country, if not better. So there are lessons that we can learn from those that are in the top areas for those key indicators and share that across everybody else to make sure that we're all aware of what's being done. People aren't having to start working on projects from scratch. They can actually learn best practice from those who are already showing by their data that they're in a good position. And I suppose a key indicator 8 is a concern for me, because out of the 7 regions in the country, The Southwest is at the bottom for key indicator 8, percentage of staff personally experiencing discrimination at work from the manager, team leader, and other colleagues. And none of that is acceptable for BME staff or for white staff or staff with disabilities. We really need to be working on that to try and make the improvement. And the last area is key indicator 9. While we have seen an increase in our non-execs from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities increasing in the Southwest, we still aren't seeing the representation at board level. And without that representation at board level, we don't have representation or people who are going to speak up about the disparities that we're seeing within our organizations from those particular groups. So we really need to be working on that. We do have the best of around 6%. The national average is still down minus 10%, but within the Southwest, one of our organizations is at minus 21.3%. So there is work to be done. The data speaks for itself, and we need to be focusing in on that. Next slide, please. So just as a brief summary, as at the 31st, within the 31st of March this year, there was 22.4 BME staff working in the NHS. And that was an increase from 19.1% since 2018. However, the leadership doesn't reflect the diverse makeup of the country as a whole. And in the Southwest, this is a particular concern. We know that we have very few boards who are broadly representational population of each trust, of the trust it serves, while there's been an increase of the voting membership since 2016. The Southwest and the national picture, the top difference in workforce compared to the overall BME workforce. Each organisation has plans. You should have all received your action plans that have been presented to you through the National Workforce Race Equality Standard team and the Workforce Disability Equality team. So the target of 19% BME representation by 2025 is going to be a real stretch. We know that that's the case, and we are also taking into consideration that given the size of some of the BME populations in some of the parts of the region. The overall picture is that it still is large disparity in the Southwest compared to the national picture, and the sticking point for our BME staff in particular is at band 5, progressing up through their organisations to band 8+ and to very senior managers. I'll pass you back now to Monique. If anyone has any questions on any of the data, but like I say, the slides will be sent out, and we're hoping that when we get this year's report, we'll see an improvement or an improving picture across a lot of those data areas which we are concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So if I could ask panel guests to join me and put your cameras on and put your mics on for me, and I'd say good afternoon to you all. Minesh, I hope you'll put your camera on as well. Hello, welcome. So I'm going to start with Minesh first. If I ask you to introduce yourself, Minesh, that would be great.
Thanks, Monique. Good afternoon to all of you. So first of all, Monique, big thank you to you to organize this and invite me to this session. I'm Minesh Khashu. I'm a neonatologist at University Hospitals Dorset, but I have a lot of other hats in the healthcare system as well. I'm a professor of perinatal health at Bournemouth University. I'm a faculty teaching improvement at the Wessex Academic Health Science Network. I'm also a non-executive director for the Southwest Ambulance Service. Apart from neonatal perinatal care, I have a huge interest in large-scale change and improvement in healthcare. And within that domain of improvement, the equality, diversity, and inclusion can play a big role. We're not interested in equality, diversity, and inclusion just for the sake of it. We're interested in it because it will improve people's lives. It will improve the care we give. It will improve the care we receive. So this is not an academic discussion. If we are better at equality, diversity, inclusion, it saves lives. It gives us a better society. I'm going to leave the rest for later, but thank you once again.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I know when we spoke, Minesh, there were many points you shared that I'd love to come out today. But I will come to Ike. And just before Ike introduces himself, I will let everybody know that today is Ike's birthday. So I am, number one, wishing him many happy returns, but also really appreciate you making time to join us today, Ike, because I know you feel passionate about what we're speaking about today too. So let you introduce yourself. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Monique, and thank you. And you weren't supposed to say that, but thank you very much. Yes, I did, taking the day off, but I said that I would do this because I think it's very important. My name is Anya. I'm a public health doctor. I trained as a registrar in public health medicine in the Southwest region, so it's a region I know well. I then went on to work as a consultant in London. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit quiet. So if you just speak up for us, Ike.
Okay. So I then went on to become a consultant. So I was saying I trained in the Southwest region in public health medicine, then went on to work as a consultant in central London, initially at Hammersmith and Fulham, my first consultant job. And between 2008 and 2016, I was in various roles as Deputy Director of Public Health, Acting Director of Public Health, either for the individual boroughs or the 3 boroughs that make up the what was then called the tri-borough. So that's Kensington and Chelsea, Hammersmith and Fulham and Westminster. And I did that until so I did the transition from the NHS to local authority in 2013. And for 4 months, acted as Director of Public Health for the 3. And thereafter, I took time out, went back to Nigeria, set up 2 organizations with a friend, Nigeria Health Watch, which is a campaigning and advocacy group, somewhat like a mini King's Fund, but not quite. But that's still going on. And then we also set up Epiafric, which was a health consulting firm, which is also still going. I then came back to the UK in 2020 because I wanted to finish working on a book I was writing. And that was when COVID happened and there was George Floyd. And I had some non-exec experience earlier in my career, exec experience, and I thought I ought to try to apply some of that in the NHS. And I've been since February an associate non-executive director at North Bristol NHS Trust, and it's been a very worthwhile experience. I'll be finishing with a year's appointment. I'll be finishing in February.
Okay, thank you, Ike. You're mostly going to need to hold your mic a bit closer because we can hear you, but it's quite faint. So
sorry about that.
That's much better. That's much better. And then thank you. And Kheelna, good afternoon. If we come to you and if you could introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me, Monique? Am I okay? Yeah. Lovely. Well, firstly, happy birthday, Ike. That's the most important thing, isn't it? My name's Kheelna Bavalia. I am dialing in from home, which is in Hampton, southwest London, where I live with my husband and 3 children. And I mention that because I'm going to apologise in advance. If my doorbell goes, it's school home time, one by one. I'm a GP by background, and I still work clinically. I managed to fit in a session a week, not too far from home, but my substantive role is now as one of the medical directors with NHS England in the Southwest region. And that involves lots of different things, but I guess the 3 big items that I'm currently involved in as part of my portfolio is professional standards. I'm the responsible officer for our GPs across the Southwest and manage the performance list with a team that looks after our dentists and our optometrists across the Southwest. I'm the medical director for primary care and doing a piece of work with wonderful colleagues across the system on NHS at home and virtual wards. That's probably the big things that we're working on at the moment.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So like I said before, I know I've had conversations with all of you separately, and I've also shared, been kind and said some of what I'd like to ask you. But Minesh, if I could come to you first, if that's okay. You shared so much of us there about what you're doing now, but it'd be really helpful to just have a bit of a summary about your journey, both into the boardroom as a non-exec director, but also as a very senior and, well, if I may say, a world-class clinician. I know about some of your research and your work that's pioneering, but it'd be great for the audience to hear a little bit about how you got there.
Yeah, thank you. So I was born in India. So I trained in different parts of India as a clinician, then came to the UK initially for a couple of years of training around late 90s, and then obviously had to train here again. And in those days, neonatology didn't have a separate training. You did pediatrics, and then if you did more newborn care, you become a neonatologist. So because of lack of specific training in neonatology, then I went and did my fellowship in neonatal care from Vancouver at the University of British Columbia, and then came back to the UK. So I've sort of in some ways trained in 3 different continents, which actually in itself has given a lot of diversity to my thinking as a clinician, because you see different things done differently in different parts of the world. And that's the beauty of diversity, is it adds to the bouquet. When you see different people, different systems, it improves you as a clinician. You become a much more rounded person. And then for various reasons, I gravitated to the south of England. So I've been in Dorset since 2007. I led the neonatal service here through a 10-year program of QI, which culminated in both the team as well as me individually winning some national awards for the quality improvement work we had done in neonatal care here at Poole. I was also then an associate medical director here for some time. Subsequently, I was the regional director for maternity and newborn care for NHS Wessex, NHS Hampshire and Thames Valley. So those were regional NHS director roles. And then for the last 6 years, I've been a non-executive director for the Southwest Ambulance Service. I think a couple of things I want to highlight. First and foremost is when we talk about people getting into board director roles, why is that important, or why do we even want to get there? And I think the important bit is, one, for you to feel that you have the expertise and skills to do that job. But more importantly, to give voice to people like us who currently don't perhaps have that voice. And to give voice to people like us is not, as I said previously, just for the heck of it. There's a reason to give that voice to people. And the reason to give that voice to people is, if you look at improvement, I do a lot of global work on improvement. And in a lot of ways, what we've come to understand today is most improvement work is actually equity work. It's about making things, processes, individuals, organizations more equitable. So unless you understand equity, unless you understand inequality, unless you understand lack of inclusion well, you can't really do good service to this piece of work. So sitting in the board is not for me to feel great about myself. I think there's always going to be some pride in what we do, but it's more importantly to get voices heard at the so-called big table within organizations, so that the organizations look at equality, diversity, inclusion from a better place. So I think that's quite important. And to me, the most important bit in terms of getting there has been perseverance. Yeah. Perseverance in 2 ways. There's a lot of doors that seemed closed, but unless you knock on them, you don't know whether somebody's going to open them or not. So I see a lot of people in day-to-day life who don't knock on doors because they think the doors are closed. So I think that's the first lesson for people is if a door is closed, you need to knock and see if somebody might open it for you. Don't presume that they're not going to open. And then the second important bit is if the door is closed and they don't open despite you knocking repeatedly, try another door. Yeah. And then another door. Yeah. And that's how life goes. That's how you get success. You don't get success the first time. There's very few people in the world who are born with that type of sort of lineage who get that. For a lot of others, you have to knock on doors, and sometimes the door will not open, and actually you will then look back and say, actually, it was a good thing for me. I got a better door opened, even though I was a bit later. So I think having faith in your skills, persevering, knocking on doors, and the last bit I want to say is think outside the box. So, for example, my NED role at SWAST, I'm a full-time clinician. I applied for a medical director role many moons back. And one of the things they said was, you don't have a board level experience. And if you don't give me a board level role, how am I going to get a board level experience? But I believe in action. I believe in coming to solutions rather than worrying too much of problems. So then I took the SWAST NED route as a way of having board level experience. So you have to think of outside the box. You have to persevere and keep knocking on doors, and the doors will open.
Thank you. There's so much you shared in what you just said there. And there's two things, if I may pull out before I ask the next question. We had a question already in the chat, and I think you started to touch on it with what you said there, Minesh, about who's in the boardroom, and the question about, are we seeing difference in decision making in the boardroom around inclusion and equality if we're seeing more Black and brown and ethnically diverse colleagues in the boardroom? And I think it's such a good question, because you hit the nail on the head with what you said there. We all say representation matters, and it does, but it's not just about representation. It's absolutely what you said about having an understanding about what's needed to move and shift the dial, and also understanding as well, in this region, you are very likely to be the only one, the only person of color, the only person from an ethnically diverse background on a board or in a senior role. And I think that the challenge that comes with that, I think is really important to hear from colleagues today in this region, because you're operating in that space where you are likely to be the only one. I hope today we start to talk about being the first as opposed to being the only one. So we see it as a positive. It's a first and you're paving a way, like colleagues here are, rather than being the only one. But the other thing you also said, which I loved, was about the perseverance. And again, we hear this a lot when we run these sessions about the perseverance, about taking the opportunity. You were almost saying, bang down the door and open it and seize the opportunity when it comes about. We also know, though, you shared a wonderful analogy with me, Minesh, about snakes and ladders, and I'm going to ask you about it later. But we also know that sometimes not everybody gets the opportunity like how you described as the ladder. And I want us to come back to that point. So really hearing what we're hearing here, it's right, but also we know that there are challenges and barriers that also have to be overcome too. So if I could come to Kheelna, and I know, Kheelna, you shared with me a bit about your journey into your role now, which is quite a high profile role across the region. It'd be great to hear a bit more about your journey too.
Hi there. Thanks, Monique. Yeah, no, happy to try and describe it. I was engrossed in listening to Mesh. It's lovely hearing people's stories, isn't it? So I can't remember what I said to you, Monique, but I'll share what comes to mind. So I went to medical school, lived outside of London, actually grew up outside of London in quite rural areas, where I grew up as probably the first or the only ethnic minority through school. Went to medical school. It was quite a late decision. I didn't know that that's what I wanted to do. I worked under a mantra of work hard and get a good education. I'm sure that was related to my parents coming here as refugees. That's the one thing you hold on to and gives you a good start in life, no matter if you're starting again. So that was the mantra. And I enjoyed medical school. I became a GP, and I enjoyed doing a few different things and other things that often happens with that career. So I'd have to say my journey was not planned, and nor was it direct. I jumped around a bit, and I got involved in education. I enjoyed postgraduate education and training and teaching. I was interested in professional standards and interested in development and improvement. And a lot of my jumping around was sideways routes. And I did some work with my practice. I did some work with Health Education England. I did some work with NHS England as it formed. And I know that some people perceived that as me not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I could see that, and I could sense that. And I had a slightly different perspective in that actually what that movement allowed me to do was give me a different lens on the similar issues that we're trying to solve. And so it was getting a bit of that diverse perspective by just working in different places. And I found that really helpful. I also, like Minesh's analogy of doors, I found that doors were beginning to open, and so I took the courage and leapt through, even if I didn't know where I was leaping to, and that was great, and that allowed me to experience lots of different things. I then I sort of noticed that doors were opening sideways rather than to give me breadth of what I was doing rather than progression, and so that's where I think I had to probably knock a bit harder, and again have the confidence, the courage to think that's great, but actually I'm not sure that that's going to add any more to what I'm already doing if I go through that door. I need to find a slightly different one. And being able to do that, I think it was about trusting myself and building my confidence. And I don't think I would have been able to do that without the help of some people who encouraged me. So those initial steps of banging down that door or knocking where it wasn't obviously open was because someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Have you thought about that?" And I'll be honest, I don't think I would have done if I didn't have that. So I think that's really, that was some quite pivotal turning points, I think, along my progression. There were hurdles before I got this post here. So I think this was the third or fourth post that I applied for in terms of director roles. The first one, it was very early and I wasn't ready for, and it was really interesting. Someone said to me, it was my regional director at the time, said to me, "Are you going to apply?" And I said, oh, I laughed and thought, that's not really for me. I'm pretty new. And he said, you probably won't get it. You don't have the experience, but actually it's a statement of intent and intention, and it'll get you noticed. You'll put your hat in the ring and people will notice that this is something that you're aiming for. So, so I did that. And actually that was quite a significant shift then in terms of the people that I met and the conversations that I was having. So I think there is something about being okay with not being successful, and I had to learn how to do that, and it was okay. And it wasn't, and reinterpret that as not a failure of something that I failed at, but actually it just wasn't the right time or wasn't the right fit, but it was still good to give it a go. So it was a couple of leaps of faith. It was definitely a couple of taps on the shoulder. And a bit like Minesh said, a bit of determination and grit to keep going and to keep trying that has led me to sort of where I am now.
Thank you, Kheelna. And I appreciate your honesty in that, you make it to the top, you make it to a high level. It's easy to say, it was all me. And actually hearing you be open and honest about what helped you and how you also recovered from the failure is important. I think a lot of people who join these sessions want to understand the warts and all, want to understand the reality of how did you get there, what helped, what didn't, and what were some of those challenges. So thank you for being so open. And Ike, if I could come back to you, I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying there about when you got to 2020, and I don't know if everybody heard it, but your decision, Minesh touched on his decision, and I saw you nodding about why he went down the non-exec route as well. Was that the same for you? And I know there's people in the audience who want to hear a little bit more about the role of an associate NED. So it would be great to hear from you why you went and took that step on your journey. You're on mute. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I was nodding all through because there's so many echoes, both in Kheelna's and Minesh's, the perseverance and all that. So I was very lucky in the sense that when I came from Nigeria in 2001 to the UK to do a master's in tropical medicine and international health, I was coming from a Nigeria that had lived through the brutal dictatorship of Sani Abacha, some of you may remember. And so it was a very bleak time. And so I saw coming to the UK as a flowering of opportunity. And so I seized everything I saw. Like every advert I saw, I would apply for. When I was at London School of Hygiene, if there were volunteers for something, I would apply for it. I would, and that's how there was an essay competition organized by the Royal Society of Medicine. I saw it on notice board. No one was paying attention. I wrote an essay, got it. We won the prize. I was then asked to come and join the Black and Ethnic Minority section of the Royal Society. And so in that way, I just applied for things and did things. And I also applied to be on the ethics committee of the council I lived in. And because I already had some academic background in ethics, I was able to do that. And what I found was that each of these I was able to then use to demonstrate in the next application, evidence of what I had done. And then I did a project on housing when I was a registrar in the Southwest. And I had to talk to various social housing associations. And at the time, there was a big push for them to diversify their boards. So one of the ones that I spoke to, Nightstone Housing, asked me if I would be interested in joining their board. I was a registrar then, so fairly low in the pecking order. And I said yes. And I did that for a couple of years, but that meant I had board level experience. And so when a year later, I think I was about a year 3 registrar, this was 2006, the Postgraduate Medical Education and Training Board, which was the overseer of a regulator for postgraduate medical education, is now part of the GMC. But it was the overseer then. They advertised for board members. So it was a national board. And a colleague, a fellow registrar, I was very active in sort of trainee politics, and because I am passionate about fairness and not. And so a colleague said to me, "You are always complaining about what PMedB does. Well, they're advertising for a board member. You should apply." And I looked at the advert and I thought, the only thing they're asking is that you're a registered general medical practitioner. I can do that. I think I might apply. I then went to brunch with my 2 cousins. I think this is instructive, and I must talk about my privilege of my background, because my parents are academics and they were educated in Britain. So it's not just, I had some, privilege that helped open doors. And I have 2 cousins who are both doctors, who were born and brought up in Britain, and our perspectives are slightly different. So I had brunch with them after I'd seen this PMedB advert on the Saturday after, and I said, I'm thinking of applying for this PMedB job, because they're sort of my guide into the system, because they have been here, they were born here. And they said, "Oh, no, you don't do that. You don't do that. You do, that's sort of thing you apply for when you become a consultant. You've done about 5 or 6 years as a consultant, built up a name, then you begin to look for these national roles and things like that." And I said, "But it doesn't say that there. But the only thing it says, registered general medical practitioner. I am registered." And I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? I'll apply. And I did, and I was shortlisted. And I said to them at the interview, "You're getting several things in one in me. You're getting a trainee, you don't have any trainees on the board. You're getting a BME person, you don't have a BME person on the board. You're getting someone from public health, which is slightly different from clinical medicine, and now you don't have any of those on the board. And so, that's why you should appoint." And, when I signed in for the interview, there were lords and ladies, professors said this, who were candidates before me. And I thought, no way am I going to get this. But they did appoint me. And it was a great learning experience, because, as a registrar, watching how decisions were made on big things, which actually gave me confidence as well that, there was no magic to it. A lot of it was what you and I would do if we were faced with a problem. Having that endorsement. And so that was really my experience. And obviously, I did that for 3 years, and then PMedB was dissolved and made part of the GMC. And then I went on to chair panels for the GMC. And after that, I sort of became executive director, acting director, and stopped a lot of the non-exec work. But what brought me back was George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, because I thought to myself, we can't complain about representation when people with my kind of CV are not putting themselves forward for roles. I have a responsibility to
Mike,
do that.
just lift your mic up a little bit, Ike, because yeah.
Yes, I have a responsibility to do that, to apply for these roles. And so I started looking for roles. And coincidentally, a former boss of mine who was a non-exec in the Southwest approached me and said, have you considered non-exec? And it turned out there was a vacancy coming up on her board, which she thought I would be good for. And what I found interesting was when I submitted my CV to the recruitment headhunters, they said, where have you been? And I thought, all of this is on LinkedIn. You know, my CV is on LinkedIn. Where have you been hunting? You know, how come you didn't approach me until? So anyway, I then went on, and it was tricky because I live in London and don't have a direct connection to Southwest anymore, beyond the fact that I teach at Bristol University, and this was not a Bristol. But I was assured none of that mattered. But then at the final interview, it was a foundation trust board. So there was an interview with the sort of core board, and then there was an interview with the governors, which I think in the Southwest is something to be conscious of. You know, the role in foundation trusts of governors in the recruitment process. Because what I found, and you know, I'm using this anecdotally, and I'm not referring to which trust it was, but you know, was very much that the chair and the board members very much thought I would make a great candidate and wanted, but the governors differed with their opinion, and I got things like, well, you're not local, and you know, and the feedback was that I didn't seem hungry enough for it, and I thought, you know, I'm a very busy person. I've spent so much time preparing for this, doing the preliminary interviews and talks with people. How much more hunger do you want me to show? And so that was not a great experience, and I resolved not to apply again for any role that I didn't have a direct connection to. But
I think people are struggling to hear you a little bit, Ike, so you just might need to talk a bit,
So in line with Minesh's perseverance, I said, I'm not going to stop applying, because if I talk about the challenges without being successful, people are going to say, well, it's our grapes. So I've got to go on, get the role, and then be able to share the stories. And so the second non-exec role I applied for, again, I was shortlisted. I went to interview. That was linked to where I live. Didn't get that one. And then the third one was for North Bristol Trust. I didn't get the exec role, but then I was offered the associate non-exec role. And so that, and you know, I'm credit to the chair of North Bristol Trust, Michelle, because it was also her personal initiative. But the associate director roles they are supposed to be an opportunity for people to get the experience.
Yes.
You know, bridge the gap between you're not quite there, get you there. But also you get a feel of what it's like, and sometimes the board can also get a feel for you, and you may then progress either into a substantive role in that trust. It sets you up well for other trusts or other NHS organizations. So mine was for a year. So I started in February, so it ends in February. And it's been an interesting and challenging time, but it's useful.
Thank you.
I have thoughts about, you know.
What would be really helpful, because I can see as you're speaking, the chat, there's lots of comments in the chat, and I know I remember with Sharifa, when I joined the regional EDI leads meeting, she was speaking about her trust. And I think there's a connection there about what you're saying, Ike, in terms of the associate NED non-executive director roles do give an opportunity to be exposed to the board, and also to prepare yourself, as you said, it gives you that opportunity. And I like what you said there, but hold on a minute, it's a little bit chicken and egg, isn't it? Because we need the exposure in the boardroom and in the role to then be ready to go on. And if we're not ready and we're getting feedback, but we're not quite there, how do we get that? So I think it would be great. I mean, do have a look at the chat, because I think it would be helpful to us if you can answer and respond to some of the questions that are happening in there. Something I just want to pick up on very briefly as well before I ask the next question is, on our last webinar, we had conversations about people, 2 comments. One was, you know, some people see non-exec roles as not as important. You know, you've got to be an exec. And we had a chair on the call from a hospital, and he was saying that actually, and I know this because I was on the board myself for nearly 5 years, non-executive directors in the chair absolutely have a say. And if they are not assured, things don't happen. So actually, in terms of, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't see ethnically diverse colleagues in the boardroom across all roles, voting member roles, non-voting member roles, clinical roles, corporate roles, exec and non-exec roles. That's not what I'm saying here. But what I do want to point out is the role of a non-executive director on a board is crucial and important. And actually the chair has the ultimate say on what happens and has a lot of influence and say over the CEO. So it's not to detract from colleagues who want to be in the boardroom. I was a director of strategy and transformation for nearly 5 years, but I think don't overlook the opportunity to become a non-executive director, to understand what those roles play. And also, I think from what I've heard here as well, people have a wealth of experience, and being able to bring that experience and influence into the boardroom, being able to bring your voice into the boardroom, the non-executive route, as Ike says, both inside and outside of the NHS, is really crucial. So I just wanted to tease that out there and to say that. And it's another reason why I like to have non-executives on the panel as well as other directors too. But I am conscious of time. And I know Ruby, so if you can see Ruby, my colleague Ruby's here. Ruby will support us with pulling your questions out. Please do post your questions into the Q&A. We are going to come to those, okay? And if you've put questions in the chat, Ruby will pull those out as well. But I've got a couple of questions before we move into the audience Q&A for my panel as well. So I just want to ask, if I could come to you, Minesh, in terms of how you're using your power and influence. You spoke to us a little bit before about inequalities and about the importance of people understanding that. But could I ask you the question, how are you using your power and influence? Because you wear many hats across many different spaces. How are you using that to help tackle inequalities?
So I think the first and foremost thing people need to appreciate is leadership is a state of mind. Leadership is not about a role. Yeah, whether I'm on the ward, whether I'm walking in a corridor, whether I'm in Sainsbury's, whether I'm in a bus, I'm in a plane, leadership is about mindset. It's how you engage with your environment and how you tackle situations and things like that. So as a leader with a particular color of skin, sitting on a board, it's about my mindset. What is missing on the board? What are they not thinking about? When we talk about diversity, I think a critical part of diversity that's not well talked about is thought diversity. It's the fact that different people who have had different journeys will see the same thing differently. Yeah, there's a well-known incident about an elephant who people from different sort of areas, they were blinded and they were asked to describe what this animal was, and the person who was describing the trunk had a very different description. The person who was looking at the sort of tail bit had a very different description. It was the same thing. So similarly, we have had very different journeys, so we'll see things differently. Mm-hmm. And if you look at evolution at a bigger evolutionary level, organizations that are more diverse will flourish because the diversity of people gives them diversity of thought, and diversity of thought gives them the different skill set that they are able to manage a very dynamic changing landscape. So that's where equality, diversity makes business sense. So it's not just we want to be nice to people and give them equality. Diversity is about becoming better organizations, better systems on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's quite important. So in the boardroom, when I'm sitting, I'm looking at, in addition to whatever else I input into the board, I'm looking at everything from a equity lens. I'm looking at everything from an inclusion lens and asking myself, are we doing justice to this? If we're taking this decision, have we included that? So I think some bit of focus at board level on equity, on equality, on inclusion, repeatedly asking ourselves who's not in the room. I think that's quite important. When we do meetings, when we try to engage with our communities, one of the important questions we should be asking is, who is not in the room, guys? Yeah. Because that's where when we get to listen to the less heard of communities, and that's where a large part of our improvement will happen, because otherwise you'll have the same people at the same table talking about the same stuff. So that's where diversity becomes quite important. And I think to be frank with you, there are some battles which I will win, there are some battles which I will not win. That doesn't prevent me from fighting the battles. Yeah. And sometimes you have to be astute enough to decide which battles to fight and which battles not to fight, yeah. So if you want to win a bigger war, you sometimes decide, oh, this is not a battle for today, leave it for some. So I think we also have, and sometimes I think that is important, that's more important learning. There was something in the chat box about, oh, we can't just keep knocking on doors. That's not the message we're giving. We're saying to you, or to anybody, there'll be some doors you'll knock, they will not open, but you need to try another door. I'm not saying knock harder. It's not asking people, oh, you perhaps are not trying hard enough. That's not the message we're giving, because we know, we have been through there. We're not saying it's not lack of trying, but we're saying we need to get smarter at some of this. Yeah, if a particular type of door is not opening, we need to understand what are the type of doors that open. Yeah. So I think it's about smartness in terms of knocking on the doors and not pestering and knocking the same door again and again. If that door is not going to open, then maybe spend your energy on another door, a different type of door. If you are thoughtful, insightful, you will over time actually realize which are the doors which open and which are the doors which don't open. Just by looking at the door, you know which will open and which won't open. That's part of our learning. And I also want to highlight, which is quite important here, is we need to understand that many people who are not the same skin color or as us are on our side as well. Yeah, so I think we need to understand that there's a lot of people who share our interest in terms of diversity, who share our interest in terms of inclusion. So be mindful of that as well and utilize that. And finally, I think one of the important things I feel that people who have reached, say, the boardroom or who have reached senior leadership positions, one of the most important things we can do for others is mentoring. If you asked me what is the one single intervention which is going to change the EDI landscape, I will say better mentoring for our folk. And why do we need that mentoring? I think we need that mentoring because of, but I think that's a different question. So I'll come back to that with snakes and ladders separately, Monique. But to me, if you ask me, give me one single intervention which will change this dynamic, I will say it is mentoring.
Yes.
And mentoring not because we are deficient, Not mentoring because we are a faulty piece and somebody needs to set us right. Mentoring because the system is faulty, and for us to get what we deserve, we need special help. When I did my first consultant interview, this was way back, 2 decades back, my chief executive said that this is the best consultant interview that she has attended. And I'm not highlighting it because of that remark, but one of the reasons she said that was I was very brave in that interview. I openly said that in that interview that for me to get this job, I need to be 2 to 3 times better than my white colleague. And I said that openly. So one of my take-home messages to my colleagues is you have to be brave. You have to say what needs to be said in the boardroom. Yeah, you can't look the other way. Yeah,
that's right.
If you want to succeed, you have to be brave. You have to be able to say what the right thing is. And there's no other way. There's no other way.
I couldn't agree more, you know, and I think thank you, because this is why we bring this conversation, to hear from colleagues who are in those senior spaces and are in the boardrooms, not because we're trying to say everyone knows it or not at all, but to speak from experience, to share that insight and to help you understand it. And I do want to pull up on the point of, and I say it every time we have these sessions, whilst we're talking about self, and a lot of what you hear in these conversations is the journey of self with those who are on the call, you know, what they did, what they didn't do, what I also always say, this is a two-way street. This isn't just about those of you who are from ethnically diverse backgrounds or are minoritized in a different way, about how you progress when you're not in the majority and how you navigate. You absolutely hear that from our colleagues on the panel, but it's a two-way street. And I pick up on what Munir is saying, and I say it all the time. This is why we want collective action. This is why we're trying to build a movement, because to pull down the systemic and structural barriers needs energy, commitment, and a constant push to do it. And those who are in the majority, it is absolutely about them understanding how to lead more inclusively and to stop people feeling isolated and to stop the discrimination. So we're not saying that doesn't need to happen, it does, but we also know that to navigate, even if you are in the majority, some of what we're saying would still be applicable, but some of what we're saying is even more important when you're in the minority. And that's why I ask colleagues to share openly about that. Now, I'm conscious that we have lots of questions, and I also know that Ranjit's going to come back onto the screen because we're going to talk a little bit about allyship as well. But before we switch into that, I just want to come to Kheelna, because Minesh, you're doing my job for me. You're making it so easy for me because you're answering all the questions in one. It's brilliant. But I do want to ask Kheelna, before we open up the Q&A and talk about allies as well, what's the main message that you would want to give? So Minesh has given us the message about mentoring and, you know, and why that's important. From your perspective, what would be the key advice you'd want to give to any aspiring execs or senior leaders in the audience today?
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things. I think one thing I would say is give yourself the best chance by better understanding yourself. I think understanding yourself and being as comfortable as with yourself as you can be, and that is a journey. I'm still on it. It's not finished. I'm not a finished product. Will help, and that's being curious without judgment is really important. You've got to be kind to yourself in that process. So I would say that's one thing. I would say let people help you. And I think at the beginning I talked about people encouraging me to apply for roles, and it was people that saw things that I didn't see in myself. So get that help and ask people how to do it. One of the things that I learned along the way was around, it sort of felt like there was this unpublished rule book that I didn't know about how to get into these senior roles. And applying for these roles starts way before a role comes out for an advert. So it is about building those networks, making those connections, being brave enough to describe your intent and let it evolve, and get people to support you. I think that's really important. I describe it as an unwritten rule, but I think a lot of people from ethnic backgrounds probably don't have parents or close family members in exec roles themselves, so they may not be familiar with what's involved and how to go about it. So that was really important. The other thing I would say is make yourself visible, and I think that's I found that a tricky one, if I'm honest. I got through school by learning how to be slightly invisible and slightly under the radar, because I didn't want to stick out like a sore thumb. So it's that balance, I think, of navigating through life being slightly under the radar, because it served me really well, to suddenly then having to get myself out there and be very visible. And to be visible in spaces where often I was invisible. I was often in meetings and probably no one thought to invite me into the conversation. So it's a really tricky one. I probably said a lot in there, but yeah, trust yourself and be kind to yourself, but be curious about yourself and understand yourself. Get some help, and get yourself out there, build those networks.
Thank you so much. And I can see in the chat that what you're saying there is resonating, and people are finding it extremely helpful, so thank you. So I'm going to move into our question space now, and Ranji, I know you wanted to come on and speak about allies, and we've got a point here about what are your thoughts on allyship. Could you guide us on how we can form and empower more people to be allies in the organisation? Would you like to take that question?
Yeah, yes, I'll take that. But before I take that, I just want to share a quick story, my own personal story, in terms of where I am, how I am, and that not too long. But I've shared it with a couple of people and they found it fascinating. So this is why I thought I'd bring it into the allyship conversation. I've been around in the NHS for about 28 years in different parts of the NHS trusts, NHS England, Department of Health, and here I am. And I'm a band 9. But before I kind of secured this band 9, I had to go for 5 interviews. Each interview I went, you know how you do the presentation, you work hard, you try and find out questions, you answer about 20 questions, you predict them, you do your lines and you do everything. So each time I'd gone for the interview and they'd say, well, you were really good at this, but you missed that. So that thing, I'd go back, revise, read up, and then pull it all together for my next interview. And it went on and on and on. And after 5, I was absolutely exhausted. I mean, they weren't 5, one after the other. I gave myself a 6-month breather. And then on the 5th one, what really upset me was I went back and one of the panel members said, you were really good. You came across really articulate, Ranjit, really good. But you need to respond in a sophisticated way. And that really shocked me, because what do you mean a sophisticated way? You know, I'm Asian. You're telling me to be my authentic self and bring my authentic self into a leadership role, but then you're telling me I'm not sophisticated? And it's so annoying because, you know, I'm not English. My parents are first generation Asians. You know, I was brought up in India. I know Punjabi. I read it, I write it, and everything. English is my second language. How can I be sophisticated? And that's like really annoying. And I wanted to just share that personal story. And how I got here was through allies. So it's really important that you build your allies and you build your networks to support you to get where you are. You know, it's what the gentleman said about mentoring, coaching. We need that. It's about Kheelna saying, you know, be brave, be yourself. For every 5 people that knock you down, you're going to have that one ally that supports you, because that's how I got this job. Somebody that recognized that talent in me, someone that said, I think you'd be really good at this job, Ranjit. You know, come and speak to me if you want any support, any background information. And you know what? Here I am today telling you my story. You know, David and I, we've worked together in this place for a while. We have like allyships, we have allies champions, and it's really useful because they hear our story and they share our kind of concerns. And sometimes it's shocking, but actually, you know what? It's good to be truthful. We need to shock them so that they actually understand what we're going through and how they can support us. And that's what I wanted to share.
No, thank you, Ranji. I appreciate that. And just to pick up on the point of, I I know you and David do a lot of work to try and support colleagues across the region. So I think it will be great if there are resources or spaces or information that people can access with regards to empowering more people to be allies. And I'd use the word encouraging as well, isn't it? Because I think there's something about being an ally isn't always easy. You know, sometimes that people will want to be comfortable to be your ally in private, I suppose, but sometimes they feel frightened to speak up. And so I think the point that Minesh was making about being brave, I think it's also about allies being brave as well, you know, and that we encourage it. I don't think there's something about banging a table and demanding someone's an ally, because they're not going to be the best ally for you. But people who are offering allyship quietly, you know, I think I'd encourage you. It's not about being boastful, but actually when people see you doing it, when people see you actively sponsoring and speaking up for colleagues, they'll feel comfortable to do it too. So remember that comment I said about let's try and switch being the only one to being the first, and that we support each other. And if actually more of us do it, so if we can encourage more allies, then actually people feel more confident because you're not in the minor, you're not in the smaller group anymore. Yeah, so I think it's, so thank you for asking the question. I think it's a really good one. Ruby, I'm going to ask you to come off mic because I know that we have quite a few questions and I want to try and get some of these across to our panel. So if you'd like to fire away.
Hello, it's so good to see you all, and I'm so happy to be here. So I'm going to kick off with some questions. Let's get straight into it. So we've got quite a few. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what is the panel's view on the extent to which we do or do not identify and develop people from ethnic minority backgrounds, that talent for future board roles? And if not, what do we do to kind of change that? What do we need to do to change it? So
Ranji, I'd quite like to ask you that question as you're here now, if that's okay. Would you take on, so what more could we be doing to develop talent to get into senior roles, talent from diverse backgrounds?
We're actually looking at a piece of work around this within the Southwest region. And one of the things that we thought would be really good was to have like a budding up system, where whatever grade you are currently at, we buddy you with somebody at the next grade to really hone that talent and develop that individual for, say, a year, 6 months to a year, so that you get the opportunity to work at the next level. And when those opportunities and those roles are available, you've got the experience to do the next role. So in terms of that, the budding up system, the availability and managing that talent, we've tried loads of things, as you all know. There's loads of talent management programs. You know, we also find that people from ethnic minority are far more qualified, because people say, oh, you need this qualification and you need that qualification. But actually doing all these qualifications, you don't get the next bloody role, do you? So, you know, it's really annoying in that case.
Thank you, Ranji. And I was going to, you know, it's thank you for people answering in the chat, because I was just going to say, actually, it would be really great to hear views on what you're suggesting about the buddying up system. And I can see someone saying already, it would be a great opportunity as it allows colleagues to get relevant experience. And I think a word that I heard from all of you today is about exposure as well. Bravery jumps out at me, and excuse the pun, because I didn't know you were all going to say things that were being about brave, and this is called Bravery in the Boardroom. But I think exposure is something I've heard from all of you as well. And whether you, like Ike, grabbed the opportunity and saw an opportunity and took it, you know, and thought, actually, I've got something to offer in this space and I'm going to go into it and expose myself there, or whether, like Kheelna, you were tapped on the shoulder and said, actually, I think this was right for you, and you're then exposed to opportunities in that way. But I think that's quite a key point. Ruby, we'll take the next question.
So there's something here, let me give the context a bit to this next question. There's something here about once you get to the board, being the minority in that board, that voice, that minority voice. So how do you feel valued as a valued member, and how do you kind of build that credibility once you get there? And that's to anyone on the panel members.
Ike, if I ask you that question, so how have you, especially when you said, you know, you went for the NED role a few times, you didn't get it, you're now in the boardroom as an associate NED, how have you built credibility in your boardroom? If you just hold your mic right up for us so we can hear you.
I think that's a difficult question for me personally to answer, but I think what colleagues have said to me is, because I have worked in public health, in local authority, in the NHS, in a variety of roles and also internationally, I bring a perspective that many of them find unique, and which I find surprising that they find unique, because it's just stuff I know I've picked up. So I think that's one way. I think I'm fortunate that I've got to a stage in life and career where, I'm able to be braver than I would have been in the past. I've always been fairly brave, I think, but so I don't bite my tongue anymore. And I particularly thank George Floyd for that, because he's made it possible for that to be more acceptable than it was in the past, regardless of what people say. That's been my experience. I do, I'll illustrate something that happened not in my current role, in a previous role when I used to chair panels, and someone, an Asian health professionals brought before, on a certain issue, and everyone around the table said, of course, it was obvious that what they did was dishonest, and because everyone knows X, Y, and Z. And I said, I've been a consultant in this country for 5 years, and this is the first time I'm hearing that this is not acceptable practice. And what I was able to create was reasonable doubt to say we don't know, because there is a possibility from my experience that this person didn't know. And I left that meeting because I was able to persuade the others, and the person was let off. I left that meeting with a mixture of happiness that we got that guy off, but sadness about all the panels where there wasn't someone with my perspective able to say that, no, actually, that's not how it works. And I think, that happens again and again. The other story I have, which is not directly linked, but I think is important, is about not speaking up and why we don't speak up. And I illustrated it with something that happened at Westminster City Hall when we both worked there, Monique. And basically, it was when Uber was coming in, and the black cab drivers were demonstrating against Uber being given a license. So every Wednesday, I think they would drive around protesting. And we looked out of our windows and said, what's going on? And someone explained what it was. And a little debate started in the team about, who was right, Uber or the black cab, should support. And I stayed out of it. And then someone said, you're not saying anything, Ike. And I said, yes, because the number of times a black cab has refused to pick me, put their light off, and then gone on to pick up a white person a few yards down the road, I don't really have much sympathy for them. And all my colleagues who I've worked with for many years, we're all, does this happen often? And I was surprised, because if I had said that in a black gathering, nobody would have been surprised. You wouldn't have mentioned at all. And I had to ask myself, and so they were very sort of upset and sad on my behalf, and angry. And I was sort of a bit angry that they didn't know. And what it said to me was, the reason why I never talked about it was I didn't want to be the person banging on about race. I didn't want to be the person, if I said, oh, black cab didn't stop for me today, or I come with another story. And this is a message I think is important. When someone says someone's been racist to me, don't ask them, are you sure? Because if someone comes back from a supermarket and says, the supermarket assistant was rude to me, you don't ask them, are you sure she was rude? You don't.
Such an important point, Ike, because I think when people speak, there's something. So we talk a lot about lived experience, don't we? And we talk a lot about sharing lived experience. I think there's a couple of things there, in the sense of, if people are sharing their lived experience, please take action and use that for good. And
also in the boardroom, when someone says, okay, say I spot that ethnic minority professionals are being disproportionately disciplined, or
we saw that in the
data from David.
If I
raise it, and the board. And the board says, oh, I don't focus on that. You know, making it seem as if I'm getting on my personal hobby horse. I'm less likely to raise it the next time and the next time and the next time.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's an appeal to boards, I think, to just when you appoint people from ethnic minority backgrounds or disability backgrounds or, you know, LGBT backgrounds, don't then, when they try to share from that perspective, shut them down. Because that's actually what they're there for.
Yeah. I think it's so important. It connects to what Minesh was saying.
What they're there for.
Yeah, it does. It connects to what was said before. But I think we always usually get a question about speaking up and being brave. And I think you've touched on it, and Minesh touched on it as well. I think there's the next step of it, isn't it? And then if you are challenged, or if, like you said, people are trying to question what you're saying, actually to lean into that and be like, no, to still be able to stand up to the challenge of that as well. But as I said, I think people ask for lived experience, and it's important to take that in. It's important to see the individual and understand that in that. But if you're asking for it, please use it for good. And please also appreciate that sometimes it can be very emotionally traumatic for people sharing their story. So when I ask you guys here to share your story, I also respect that some of the things you share and touch on may be emotionally triggering for others too. But I hear your point there, Ike, about, so when we are asked, or people are asked to share their experience, or we saw David's data front and center. Yeah, we saw the data, we saw the red rag rating about colleagues experiencing discrimination, colleagues experiencing bullying and harassment. We saw it. So it's there. So in terms of people questioning or querying it, you're questioning and querying facts. Yeah, it's there. So I'm going to go to Ruby. I would really like us to take one more question. And I would like Minesh to take that question before we finish up. So Ruby, if you can give that to me, because I know we have to finish, even though we've had so many questions today.
Oh, Minesh, I've got a great question for you. So if you were to see your younger self, what would you give, what conversation would you have with yourself in terms of the advice you'd give to your younger self at the start of your career journey?
Ruby, I'll answer that, but before that, I want to go back to the last question and highlight something quite important. And this was about insights of operating in the boardroom as a minority. I think it's quite important that we don't get sucked into feeling different. Yeah, don't get sucked into feeling different. Diversity actually is about everybody is diverse. So people, so this is not just about the protected characteristics or color of skin. Everybody in a boardroom, whether they are white or black or green or blue or whatever they are, everybody is different. They have their own journey. They will bring a different perspective. So we should not get sucked into us being different in a negative way. We are there because we add value through our skill set, through our journeys, through what we think about life. So as long as we focus on that, we should, I don't walk into a room and think I'm the only black guy around. I don't want anybody to walk into the room and think I'm the only woman here. That's not how leaders think. Leaders think in a positive paradigm where you're not thinking, oh, I'm short of this, or I don't know this. So you need to be thinking that I'm at this table, I have earned this place. What can I do to improve the working of this organization? What is my skill set? What little can I do to make it better? How can I improve patient care? So don't get sucked into as if you don't belong. So don't get sucked into that. That's quite a big sort of, I think, from me, a take-home message. So in terms of what I would advise, I would give, I think as Kheelna said, planning is important, but planning is not everything. I think there's a bigger world force which opens the doors for you at the right time, and you fall down sometimes and you get up sometimes. So I think don't overthink it. I think it's good to have a bit more clarity of what you want to achieve, and more importantly, why you want to achieve it. So if somebody wants to do a board role or a director role, the important question is, why do they want to do it? And the answer to that why comes in understanding themselves better. That's what Kheelna said, is a part of leadership journey is about knowing who you are, what drives you, what is important to you. So nobody can make you a leader but yourself. Yeah, it's not a role, it's not a title, it's not written on my forehead. It's how I behave with people around me. They make me a leader. I don't make myself a leader. How do they make me a leader? Not because of the role I have, but because of the way I behave. What are my behaviors showing? But if I went back to my own self, I would say you perhaps need a bit more clarity of what do you want? Why do you want it? And then I would make up steps. So if I wanted, say, to be a board director in 5 years' time, what do I need to do in the first year? What do I need to do in the next few years? What are the milestones to reach there? So if people have a bit more clarity in terms of who they are, what is driving them, why do they want to do it, and then devise steps of getting there. Once they have a bit of steps in mind, they also use mentor. The reason I'm repeatedly saying to about mentoring is, as I've told Monique, when people ask me to describe racism, and for that matter, any other issue with diversity and inclusion, I use the example of snakes and ladders. This is a game we all played as kids. So the best way for me to describe racism in organizations is that the same people get the ladders all the time, and people like us get the snakes all the time. That's what racism is. So you need to understand, why are we getting snakes all the time, whereas others are getting ladders all the time? And to help you with your snake, so to say, and maybe get you a ladder, you need that mentor. You need that person who will block the snake from biting you, and show you, okay, there's a ladder there, go and walk towards that. And that's why I feel mentoring is very critical for people to go up the ladder. So to me, a bit more clarity in why you want to do this, devise steps of your journey, what you want to be in 5 years' time, and then use your mentors and your allies to get you there. There are plenty people who are there to help you. There are plenty of people who are there to help you. So I think it's about you taking the initiative and being brave of taking your first steps, so to say.
The chat is going crazy, Minesh, because everything you're saying is resonating so much. Me and Ruby are just saying we could listen to you all day, honestly. I think also, though, in bringing today to a close, what I've heard today is, I think there's a lot more to share. And Ranjit, I think we can talk offline, but I think, we've tried to bring you as much as we can in 90 minutes. My feeling is it will be wonderful to run another session for the region. There is so much to share. There is so much more we could have spoken about. First of all, I will thank my panel guests. Thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your truth, and your genuine inspiration. If I hadn't got into the boardroom before myself already, I kid you not, what I've heard from you today would make me feel like I could do it, and that I've got some more ideas about what I could do to navigate my next steps. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your honesty. And as I said, I've got a funny feeling that this audience is going to want to hear more from you. So I will be in touch again. And what I will do is say thank you. We'll keep the webinar open just for a couple of minutes so people can connect on the chat. And Millie, we can put our closing slide up as well to encourage people to connect with us on Bravery in the Boardroom as well. But I will close the meeting now and say thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. And just to let people know, we had at one point over 90 people on this webinar today. So really powerful about the people who've come together today. So thank you so much and take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.